What did you do first after getting out of prison? Story 1, a taste of freedom. The first thing I did when I walked out of those prison gates was head straight to the diner across the street. It sounds simple, but after 7 years of institutional food, all I could think about was having a real meal. I sat down at the counter and the waitress gave me a menu. I didn't even look at it. I just asked for the biggest burger they had, with everything on it and a side of fries. When the plate arrived, the smell hit me first. Grilled meat, fresh lettuce, the tang of pickles. I took that first bite and it was like I was tasting food for the first time in years. I could feel the grease on my fingers, the crunch of the lettuce, the softness of the bun. I know it sounds crazy, but in that moment it felt like all the weight I'd been carrying just melted away. It wasn't just about the food, it was about feeling human again. I sat there for a long time after I finished, just sipping my soda, watching people come and go. For the first time in years, I didn't have to look over my shoulder, didn't have to worry about what was coming next. I was just a guy in a diner, enjoying a meal, and that was everything. Story 2, the walk home. When the gates finally closed behind me, I didn't have anyone waiting on the other side. No family, no friends, just me and the road ahead. I decided to walk, even though I didn't really know where I was going. There was something about the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other that felt like reclaiming my life, one step at a time. I walked for hours, through neighborhoods I barely recognized, past people who didn't give me a second glance. And that was the beauty of it. After years of being watched, judged, and controlled, I was finally invisible. Eventually, I found myself at a park I used to visit as a kid. I sat down on a bench and just watched the world go by. Kids playing, couples holding hands, dogs chasing balls. I realized I hadn't seen anything like this in so long. It felt like I was reconnecting with a part of myself I thought I'd lost. I sat there until the sun started to set, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't about where I was going or what I would do next. It was about the simple freedom to choose. Story 3, a call home. The moment I stepped out of prison, I knew what I needed to do first. I had to make a call. It had been 5 years since I'd spoken to my mom. She stopped visiting after the first year, too heartbroken to see me in that place, but I knew she never gave up on me. I walked straight to the nearest payphone, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. It rang a few times, and I started to worry she wouldn't pick up, but then I heard her voice, and it was like a floodgate opened inside me. I could barely get the words out. I'm free. She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. Then she asked me where I was, and before I knew it, I was telling her everything. We talked for what felt like hours, catching up on all the years we lost. She told me about the family, how everyone was doing, and how she never stopped praying for this day. I could hear the relief in her voice, the hope. That call was the first step in rebuilding a bridge that had nearly crumbled. And as I hung up the phone, I knew I was finally heading back to where I belonged. Story 4, first breath of fresh air. The first thing I did when I got out of prison was just stand there, right outside the gate, and take the deepest breath I could manage. It sounds strange, but after 4 years in a place where the air always felt heavy, stale, and filled with tension, I just wanted to remember what real freedom tasted like. I closed my eyes and let the air fill my lungs, savoring every bit of it. There was no rush, no guard barking orders, no walls closing in on me, just the open sky above and the world in front of me. For a moment, I felt like I was in a completely different reality, where time moved slower and everything was sharper, more vibrant. I could smell the grass, hear the distant hum of cars on the highway, and even the chirping of birds. It was overwhelming in the best way possible. I knew I had a long road ahead, with a lot to figure out and rebuild, but in that moment, none of that mattered. I was free, and I let that feeling sink in, grounding me for whatever came next. Story 5, reunion with the sea. The first thing I did after walking out of those prison gates was head straight to the ocean. I'd grown up near the coast, and the sea had always been my refuge, my place to think and breathe. Being locked away for 6 years, I dreamed of those waves almost every night. I took a bus to the nearest beach, and the whole ride there, my heart was pounding. When I finally got there, I kicked off my shoes and walked barefoot across the sand, feeling the cool grains between my toes. The sound of the waves crashing was like a song I hadn't heard in years, familiar and comforting. I waded into the water up to my knees, letting the salt water wash over me, cleansing away everything I'd been through. I stood there for a long time, just staring out at the horizon, feeling the pull of the tide. It was like the ocean was welcoming me back, telling me I could start over. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, like I'd finally come home. Story 6, a quiet night under the stars. After I walked out of prison, the first thing I did was head to the countryside. I didn't want to be around people or noise. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts. I borrowed an old car from a friend and drove out to a place I used to go as a kid, a quiet field far away from the city lights. When I got there, I spread out a blanket on the grass and just lay down, looking up at the sky. The stars were bright and clear, so different from the view I had through the tiny window in my cell. I hadn't seen the stars like this in years, and it felt almost unreal. I stayed there for hours, just watching the night sky, letting the stillness seep into my bones. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in a long time. No walls, no bars, just endless sky and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. It was a simple moment, but it reminded me that there was still beauty in the world and that maybe, just maybe, I could find my place in it again. Story 7, the long-awaited hug. The first thing I did when I got out of prison was drive straight to my sister's house. We hadn't seen each other in over 5 years, and the only contact we had were the occasional letters and a few phone calls. She'd always been my rock, even when things got rough, but I knew how much my incarceration had hurt her. When I pulled up to her house, my heart was racing. I walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and knocked. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around me and held on tight. It was the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. I could feel her tears on my shoulder, and I realized just how much I'd missed her. We stood there on her porch for what felt like forever, neither of us wanting to let go. It was in that moment, in the warmth of her embrace, that I knew I was really home. The weight of those years behind bars started to lift, and I felt like I could finally start to heal.